Hey folks, my name is Nick, and in this webinar replay, we're going to be talking about how to take heads of lettuce like this and use these base components to make your salad mixes and everything that goes along with that. Let's get into it. All right, folks, thanks for joining me. This is Nick. I'm with Bootstrap Farmer. We're in our studio in Paris, Texas, just down the street from our warehouse. And tonight we're going to be talking about basically standing out in either the farmer's market or with chefs with your own custom spring mixes. Part one, we're going to be talking about what all kind of variables come into creating a salad mix. This is a picture from our local vendor. I've got some greens that we bought at the market today from Paris Natural Farms. So thank you very much for their cooperation and support. Always in the house is Ricky Chadwick. She is head of our customer service. She's going to be kind of compiling the questions that you guys have over the course of the webinar, and we're going to do a Q&A at the end, and she's going to kind of help me with that. The history of spring mix, very humble beginnings. Way back in the day, I'm talking about as America was first getting formed, mescaline was in provincial France, and kind of a mixture of both crops that they would grow and crops that they would forage. We're talking about very early days of European development and as those came about. So this is not a new concept. This notion of mixed greens as part of the diet for nutrients, for substance has kind of always been around once we got out of hunter-gatherer mode. I do really like to focus on how we got to different parts of agriculture. This is not going to talk about big commercial farming, big hydro operations, or anything like that. This is looking at producing salad mixes from a market gardener standpoint to be able to take that to the farmer's market. So moving forward, every single picture that you're going to see for the rest of this webinar was pictures that I took at my farm. Some of them are not great quality because this was back when the first iPhones were coming about, and that's how I started. So Victory Gardens, 2,400 holes of hydroponic NFT production, and then, like I said, a bunch of indoor or outdoor crops as well. So just a couple of different stages. We also had a commercial kitchen, very small commercial kitchen, specifically designed to do salads and make those productions. So you see our lettuce washing sink, some of our prep area, the packages, the labels, and things like that. You'll see a lot of examples of that during this webinar. This was my favorite salad that we ever did. It consisted of a green and red butter spring mix with compressed watermelon, jicama, black currants, mint, feta, and a house-made dressing. So that's kind of where we wound up really taking this. You're going to see this picture a couple of times for a couple of different reasons, but that's just our general base mix. On the bottom left, we did a lot of Asian greens, and then on the right, a lot of the things we're going to be talking about is kind of from my old archives of different salad mixes and things that we would do. We also did on-farm pop-up events in which people could sit in that little pavilion on the top left and see where their food was actually grown. I also had a food truck that we took to markets and did pop-ups. This was at a yoga studio in which we did like pop-up breakfasts. We had a salad club in which we delivered ready-to-eat salads to businesses on a Wednesday schedule. On the bottom right, the left and then the right picture of that trio of pictures were my little refrigerators that I had in the community at different boutiques and different gyms and CrossFit kind of places. And then that middle picture, I also served wholesale salads at a local butcher. So that's kind of the scope of what we did. So as we get into the spring mix itself, companion flavor profiles, I want us to think throughout this webinar in that it's not just a bunch of green butter lettuce. Here it is in a bag. Yeah, there's some different colors. I really want us to think about taking the next step and incorporating different textures, taste, and things like that inside of the mix. I have all these little insider secrets. These are chances for me to just kind of reflect on things that happened. Use big grocery. Like there's that term of big ag. I want us to think about using big grocery. There's a lot of money that they spend in the marketing and presentation and research on what they put on their shelves. A simple trip to a grocery store and then maybe a follow-up to a Central Market or Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's to something like that to see the difference between a regional chain and then somebody that specializes in a little bit better produce and see what kind of effort they're putting into their mixes. After this webinar, I think you'll be able to see some of the differences and why they're doing some of the things that they do. I am a big proponent of Asian greens. We're going to talk a lot about it in this webinar. I'm going to be talking about this balance of flavors a lot in that a good salad mix has a sweet component, a bitter component, and a peppery component. And that's to taste, right? You want to listen to your clients. You want to listen to your people that are buying your stuff. If they're shying away from the peppery or the bitter, maybe make those adjustments. But this sweet, bitter, and peppery trio is what is the foundations of all of these box lettuces that you see in the store. It's so rudimentary to me to look back on. This was the very first week of salads that we did. So the very bottom was a very typical of what we would see in our grow room, in that we had different plants at different stages. And so you start seeing, even in the early days that we were doing this, my mistake was the microgreens, which we just talked about, but you're already starting to see some of these mixes come into play, in that we had Toscano kale, red Russian kale, it looked like a green forest romaine with the pea shoots, and a little bit hit of other crops with an herb component. And I'm going to talk about my salad blueprint here in just a little bit. On the next slide, we're seeing some pak choi. We're seeing some bright lights chard. I see some shingunku in the background, and always the Salanova lettuce. The very bottom one, that's a red and green butter lettuce, another round of shingunku, and I'm seeing some parsley in there. So that's just, I'm telling you, this is like the very first day that we started making salads. So as we're talking to chefs, I really want you to start thinking about speaking to them in the terms and phrases they use. Learn from me. 86 the micros. 86 is used in the back of the house if they're taking something off the menu. Take those microgreens off, make it that added value sale. So stage 2 at Victory Lunch Clubs, we start looking at, we're adding other crops that we're growing. So you see some Cosmo carrots there, some radishes. We're shaving carrots and making them a little bit different. We're adding pea shoots, we're adding raspberries, and there at the bottom you're seeing a Britain Shisho watercress sorrel mix, super bitter, that matched the dressing for that particular week's salad. Stage 3, this was probably year 3, 4 kind of thing. Again, my favorite salad I mentioned earlier, and you're really starting to see what we're able to do once we got a year or so under us. And I say that to remind everybody that the stuff you grow this year, you're going to get so excited about it because it started and you have something to take to market, but each year you're going to get incrementally better. So as you go through your growing journey and you're starting seeds, and maybe some of them didn't come up or maybe some got stunted, just know that the next year you're going to get better and better, and kind of use these pictures here as an example of how, if we go back, well, look, phone cameras, the camera quality is much better, but you also see an evolution from really super basic, a little bit better. Now we're a seasoned grower and we're kind of at full swing. And then that bottom one, we're growing peppers, we're growing more herbs and using them differently. So that's kind of where we wound up at the end. So let's start taking a look at some of these flavor profiles. First of all, sweet greens, butterhead lettuce, romaine lettuce, spinach, Swiss chard, regular chard, pea shoots, mache. This is a very condensed list. These are some of the easier ones, so I kind of started there. But also keep in mind butterhead lettuce, romaine lettuce. Think about the dozens and dozens of varieties that you see inside of the seed catalogs. And one type of butterhead may do vastly better where you're at or your growing condition than another. And I really encourage everybody to trial as many varieties as you possibly can to see how that's going. On the bitter greens, radicchio, endive, escarole, I'm probably saying all those wrong, but kale for the bitter greens, really high performer. Different varieties gives you so many different colors and textures, so really play with that. And again, the red vein sorrel, you're looking at a very small leaf that is a little bit more labor intensive, but it's such a staple that you're going to find that as you're giving your folks these sweet greens that they're used to, and then you're introducing more nutritious and more sturdier and hardy greens, that you're also giving them something that they've seen before, and maybe they'll adapt it a little bit better. Peppery greens, arugula, probably one of the most prolific things. A little bit goes a long way in a mix. Watercress, even a smaller amount goes a long way. Radish greens, as we're growing out the crops for the radish itself, we also were able to use the greens for that. Just like on carrots, we would use the carrot tops for different pesto and different sauces and hummus and things like that. Mizuna, for sure grow Mizuna if you're looking at some of this. It's so fast to grow. It gets really big, really quick. You can cut it at the baby stage. It's great at every single one. Mustard greens is also one of those crops that are going to grow super fast, does great in the heat, a little bit. All these peppery greens, a little bit goes a long way. And really listen to your clients. They may request a peppery mix. They may want a milder mix. And that's just a chance for you to change those ratios and bring more than one spring mix or an added value spring mix to the market. Nasturtium leaves, just like sorrel in the bitter greens example, very, very labor intensive. But if you really want to elevate your mix and or get in with a chef or do something special, they're going to be all over that. Loft. To me, this is one of the most important aspects of that salad. Again, if we were to take spinach, all this flat stuff, and wash it and put it in a bag, it's going to settle and become flat. But when we start mixing it with other greens that are curled and different sized, it's going to bulk that up so it doesn't look like some sad flat situation. This would be what a very, I used to draw these out, but this would be an example of what my staff would expect to see Monday morning, in that we had the square profile of our containers, and I would give that volume base of spring mix. And so the bulk of the salad was the greens, was the spring mixes that we're talking about here. I would always have 2 ounces of cheese, 2 ounces of nut or fruit, sometimes something else depending on what was going on, and then 4 ounces of dressing. We probably made 90-95% of our own dressing with the seasonal herbs, and then at least a couple of seasonal crops, sometimes 3, always an herb, and sometimes a edible flower, sometimes a special ingredient where we would pair up with a bakery or a chocolatier or something like that. But that herb component, you may consider doing that with different crops or different spring mixes depending on what all's going on. But that fresh smell when somebody first opens up a package or a bag really reminds them that they're getting something special. Reserve that for maybe a higher tier spring mix if you have that. It was just a really good addition, and that was the thing that we got the most feedback on, is when they opened that package, they got hit with basil or thyme or oregano or wherever the case may be. So might be something to consider. You only need a couple of staples. Salanova, Breen was mine. Different growing conditions. You know, we had outside, we had hydro, kind of leaned on both. None of our clients really cared about how we were growing or anything like that. They just wanted quality greens. So kind of keep that in mind and to use what you have. Sometimes we had crop that we would trial or test. I'll talk about that in a second. But adding that in just to try it out and to see your client's reaction was a big part of our kind of evolution. And that stage 1, 2, and 3 that you saw before, that's how we got to stage 3, is trying stuff out, seeing what people like. Most clients will not notice those changes. People are just trying to get through their day, right? But the ones that do will really appreciate the variety, and they'll really appreciate the seasonality because they're going that extra step to shop local with you. Taste considerations, they need to be great with or without dressing. And I can't understate that enough. I really want everybody to think about the constant supply and demand that a salad mix would typically bring to your booth. The reason a chef may choose you as a purveyor of where they're getting and sourcing some of their items. So it's a very steady demand. That high quality is going to bring people back to the market and help you retain those clients. And so I want us to think about, if we're going to be consistent and if we're going to give that good quality, is to maybe overplant a little bit and be prepared to, as you're starting, you're probably going to produce, hopefully you're producing a little bit more than what your demand is, because I don't want you selling out. And there's a lot of different ideas about it's good to sell out and not take stuff home. I don't want you to disappoint any clients. This stuff is going to last, especially if you're doing it and you have proper refrigeration and a wash pack area and stuff like that. It'll carry over from week to week, and you can still sell it the next week. Don't give your clients room to walk out the door. I see a lot of CSAs, they'll kind of, hey, sign up for the spring or sign up for the fall, and they automatically open and close the door for their clients instead of having automatic setups. Listen, once somebody signs up with you, they're a customer until they quit. Don't give them a reason to leave. Don't give them a reason to come to the farmer's market and then bounce. Don't not show up for your folks. And that's not saying don't take a vacation, but that may be saying make sure somebody is representing you properly at the market from your farm. Market research does not start and stop in the beginning. It's an ongoing situation. And I told you I'd bring up cilantros, but I'm going to pair that with bitters, and that really listen to your clients if they're giving you feedback. I if you say anything with cilantro, half of the people are going to go, I hate cilantro. I don't know what the deal is. That is likely to also be true with some of the peppery greens and maybe some of the bitter greens. This will go super short because we've already kind of talked about it, but now you have taste and color and texture and loft and all that stuff, and you kind of have the basic building blocks within the crops. We're going to take a look at just some very basic recipes, and I'm going to go over my staple crops one more time. I went back to my notes: Breen and Green Forest Romaine, Salanova, Red Russian Kale for sure, Bright Light Swiss Chard, again, always red vein sorrel. I typically mostly did that outside, sometimes hydro, but not always. Pea shoots, always in 1020s, of course. I mentioned the Tropicana and how big and versatile that was. Pak Choi and all kinds of different varieties. Win-Win was really good. Tatsoi, Mizuna, talked about both of those at length. Tokyo Bacana, again, for the loft, can't beat it. Coastal Star. I did okay with Mirror, but I really think I'm the only person on the planet that didn't do the best with it. So play with some of those heat-tolerant lettuces, see how you do. Don't forget to use your shade cloth. Mustard greens. I tended to use more mustard greens than arugula. I felt that people treated arugula like they did cilantro. It was a hard yes or a hard no. I could get away with some of the same flavor profiles with some of the Asian greens. Volume packaging, that's going to be your call. The thing about weight that I did not like is if we did it by weight, a head of romaine would be vastly heavier than a head of bacana or a head of butterleaf. And so I always felt like, it takes forever to bag and weigh it and scale it and have the proper calibrations on the scale and make sure you're not cheating anybody. I tended not to do that. I did it by volume. We mixed up our mix for the week. We had a 9 1/4 by 9 1/4, 2-inch tall clamshell. We would put it in and just kind of press it down a little bit, shut the lid. And what that did for the client, and you see on this one a little bit of herbs on top, as they opened that up, the hinge would kind of pop open, and they would feel like they were getting more than what they were buying. Like they felt like they weren't cheated. They got that fresh hit of herb, and that really worked out good for me. The stuff I bought today was in a bag, and that's the thing I most commonly see, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. People are used to it, but just consider if you're going to do weight or volume, especially if you're doing heavy multi-mix crops. Spring mix crop rotations, lettuce is very familiar to clients. They're going to like those no matter what because they're used to it. There's a lot of folks out there that may pass your booth because it looks too wild. So kind of play that balance, look at your market, see how things are going. Lettuce is always good, especially romaine, the butter lettuce. Asian greens, we've talked about that a lot. Again, that quick turn, multiple flavors, matching that to something that's more familiar, maybe a good way to introduce some of your folks to that. I put specialty. I don't really consider some of these actually special crops, but specialty in that incorporating that into a spring mix may be a little different, and a little bit goes a long way. A whole head of cabbage, thinly shredded, mixed in, is going to give you pops of crunch, color, taste, texture beyond the lettuce, where if you're a little short, that may help. Shredded carrots in the root crops, you see that a lot with like coleslaw mixes and things like that. There's no reason it couldn't be in a spring mix, especially at the local level. Radicchio, again, that's one of those classic bitter greens or leafy type of crops that you should have all the time. I'm ready for questions.
Our first question is from Dustin Labatt. I hope I'm saying that right. We have a chef asking us to add a crunchy green to our existing mix. Our existing mix is a Salanova. What are your recommendations?
Yeah, the radicchio would be good. I would maybe press him for a color, texture, flavor profile. Radicchio would be good. The kind of reddish white one, endive maybe if you can grow it. And I suggest everybody try like the Belgium endives in both the yellow and red. It's fantastic. I'm telling you, I cannot get enough Breen. Green Forest was pretty great, but it tended to be a little leggier on the top, especially the farther it went. But that Breen is real compact and has that real thick spine, almost celery-like. So if he's wanting crunch, Breen would be my number one recommendation. I would also look at Pak Choi. In the Win-Win variety, it has that really thick, really white stalk contrasted with a green spoon-like, real sweet cup on top that is reminiscent of spinach and tatsoi, but it has that crunch in that Win-Win Pak Choi. That'd be my recommendation. All right, everybody. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for the Bootstrap staff for assisting with this, and we will see you on the next webinar.